The clock on the wall of Pinewood Veterinary Clinic ticked past midnight as Dr. Sarah Miller stared into the amber eyes of the pregnant German shepherd before her. The examination room felt colder than usual. Despite the heating working overtime against Montana's bitter December winds, Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she prepared the syringe, a familiar motion made unfamiliar by the weight of what she was about to do. "I'm sorry, girl," she whispered. The dog didn't growl or struggle like most did. Instead, she placed one paw gently on Sarah's wrist, as if understanding. Then it happened, something Sarah would later describe as the moment that changed everything. A single tear formed in the corner of the shepherd's eye, gathering until it broke free and rolled down her muzzle. Dogs don't cry, Sarah's medical training insisted, but her heart knew what her eyes witnessed. The dog's swollen belly shifted as her unborn puppies moved within. Sarah set down the syringe with sudden resolve. "Protocol be damned. Not today," she breathed. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Pinewood. Montana wasn't a place that welcomed change. Nestled between towering pines and mountains that seemed to scrape the very heavens, the town of 800 souls had weathered economic downturns, harsh winters, and the slow exodus of its young. Dr. Sarah Miller had been the town's only veterinarian for 11 years now, ever since old Doc Peterson had passed on his practice to the fierce 38-year-old with too many degrees and not enough patience for bureaucracy. The veterinary clinic sat on the edge of town, a weathered clapboard building with a metal roof that sang during rainstorms and groaned under winter's heavy snow. Inside, it was warmer than most places in Pinewood. Sarah made sure of that. Animals in recovery needed warmth. So did the strays she occasionally and against regulations allowed to stay overnight. The German shepherd, whom Sarah had started calling Bella, now rested in the clinic's back room on a bed of blankets. Her coat, though matted and dull, showed hints of the traditional black and tan markings. Sarah could see evidence of neglect, the slight protrusion of ribs, the healing scar above her right eye, the way she flinched at sudden movements. Yet there was dignity in how Bella held herself, intelligence in her amber eyes. Jack and Emma Thompson lived just outside town on 5 acres of land, with a barn converted into a haven for animals. Jack, with his perpetual stubble and calloused hands from 40 years of carpentry, had a gruff exterior that masked his gentle way with creatures. Emma, a retired elementary school teacher with silver-streaked auburn hair, had been known to nurse birds with broken wings back to health on their kitchen table. Jessica Anderson. Jess, to everyone who knew her, ran the county's only animal rescue on a shoestring budget and sheer determination. At 29, she had already faced down developers, hunters, and bureaucrats to protect the animals she championed. Her small frame and freckled face often led people to underestimate her, a mistake they rarely made twice. And then there was Richard Coleman, the man who had brought Bella in to be put down. Sarah had known Richard peripherally for years. He lived in the large house on Cedar Ridge, kept to himself, and rumor had it he bred dogs somewhere on his property. What kind and for what purpose? Nobody seemed to know. The clock on Sarah's desk read 3:17 a.m. when her phone rang. She'd been dozing in her office chair, case notes scattered across her desk. Having decided to stay at the clinic to monitor Bella through the night, the German shepherd lay on a blanket in the corner, 5 tiny puppies nursing contentedly at her side. "Hello?" Sarah answered, her voice thick with exhaustion. "It's Richard Coleman." The voice on the other end was clipped, impatient. "I understand my dog is still alive." Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced at Bella. who had raised her head at the sound of the phone, amber eyes alert. "Mr. Coleman, it's the middle of the night. How did you get this number, Beth?" "Small town," he replied dismissively. "Word travels, especially when someone decides to ignore a client's explicit instructions." Sarah stood, moving away from Bella and the puppies, keeping her voice low. "I made a professional judgment call." "You made a mistake," Richard countered. "That dog is my property, and I expect her returned immediately. Mr. Coleman, she's just given birth. She needs medical supervision. Then I'll collect her and the puppies in the morning, 9 a.m. The line went dead before Sarah could respond. She stood motionless, phone still pressed to her ear, heart hammering in her chest. Bella watched her, head tilted slightly as if sensing her distress. "We need to move you," Sarah whispered. By sunrise, Sarah had called both Jess and the Thompsons. Jack arrived first, his truck rumbling up the gravel drive behind the clinic just as pink light began to streak the eastern sky. "Got your message," he said, following Sarah into the back room where Bella and her puppies were being prepared for transport. "Emma's setting up the mudroom now. It'll be warm and quiet for them there." Bella regarded the newcomer cautiously, positioning herself between Jack and her puppies. Sarah knelt beside her, stroking her head gently. "It's okay, girl. Jack's going to help us." "She's protective," Jack observed. "Good mama." Sarah nodded. "She's also remarkably well behaved. Watch this." She made a simple hand gesture, and Bella immediately lay down, though her eyes remained fixed on Jack. That's not typical obedience training. Someone spent serious time with her. Makes you wonder how she ended up with Coleman. Jack mused, carefully helping Sarah prepare a nest of blankets in a large crate for transport. One by one, they placed the tiny puppies in the crate, Bella watching their every move. The smallest male, whom Sarah had resuscitated, squeaked in protest as she lifted him, his little paws batting at the air. "This one's a fighter," Sarah remarked, settling him beside his siblings. "Got a name for him yet?" Jack asked. Sarah smiled. "I was thinking Scout." Jack nodded approvingly. "Suits him." They loaded the crate into Jack's truck just as Jess arrived, her ancient Subaru kicking up dust as she parked beside them. "What's the plan?" she asked, red curls wild in the morning breeze. "Jack's taking Bella and the puppies to his place," Sarah explained. "I need you to stay at the clinic. Richard Coleman is coming at 9, and someone needs to be here when he arrives." Jess's freckled face hardened. "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth, more or less, that Bella went into labor, had complications, and was transferred to emergency foster care." Sarah ran a hand through her disheveled auburn hair. "It's technically true, even if the emergency was Richard himself." As Jack's truck disappeared down the road, Bella peering alertly from the passenger window, Sarah felt a weight settle in her chest. She was violating professional ethics, potentially risking her license yet watching the German Shepherd with her new puppies. She couldn't bring herself to regret her decision. Richard arrived at 9:00 a.m. precisely, his black Audi gleaming in the morning sun. Sarah met him in the reception area, Jess hovering nearby, ostensibly filing records but clearly listening to every word. "Where is she?" Richard demanded, without preamble. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "Mr. Coleman, as I tried to explain last night, your dog went into labor shortly after you left her in our care. There were complications that required specialized attention." "Specialized attention?" Richard repeated skeptically. "And where is this specialized attention being provided?" with a licensed animal foster care provider, Sarah replied. The careful wording not technically a lie. The Thompsons had, in fact, fostered animals for the county shelter before. The puppies are very fragile at this stage. 2 almost didn't survive. Richard's cold eyes narrowed. I don't care about the puppies. The dog is my property, and I expect her returned immediately. That would endanger the puppies' lives, Sarah countered. Separating them from their mother at this stage. That is not my concern, Richard interrupted. I made my wishes regarding those puppies clear when I brought her in yesterday. Jess made a small noise of disgust from her position by the filing cabinet. Richard glanced at her sharply, then back to Sarah, his expression calculating. I see what's happening here, he said softly. You've decided my dog is worth saving against my explicit instructions. Very noble. Dr. Miller, also very illegal. Sarah met his gaze steadily. What's illegal, Mr. Coleman? Is animal cruelty? Euthanizing a healthy pregnant dog for convenience could certainly be construed as such. The threat hung in the air between them. Richard's expression didn't change. But something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You've made a serious mistake, he said finally. One that will have consequences. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. I'll be back with the sheriff, and when I find my dog, I'll remember everyone involved in hiding her from me. The bell above the door jingled as he left, the sound incongruously cheerful in the tense silence he left behind. Well, Jess said after a moment, that could have gone better. Sarah sank into a chair, the adrenaline leaving her system in a rush. It also could have gone worse. She looked up at Jess, determination replacing fatigue. We need to find out more about Bella, where she came from, how she ended up with Richard. If we're going to protect her, we need leverage. What neither woman knew, as they began formulating their plan, was that Bella's past contained secrets that would change all their lives, and that Richard Coleman's threats were far from empty. Sarah's hands trembled as she replaced the stethoscope around her neck. Outside, snow was falling in thick, cotton-like clumps, accumulating on the clinic's windowsills faster than the old building's heating system could melt it. Bella lay on her side, her breathing labored, while Sarah stroked her head gently. It's happening too fast, Sarah muttered to herself. Reaching for her phone, she dialed Jess's number, fingers leaving damp prints on the screen. Jess? It's Sarah. You need to get here now. Bella's going into labor. It wasn't supposed to happen tonight. Sarah had estimated Bella was a week away from delivery. But sometimes trauma could accelerate things. The stress of nearly being euthanized. The changes in environment. It was enough to trigger early labor in any mammal. Jess arrived 20 minutes later, snow clinging to her red hair and eyelashes. How far along is she asked, shrugging off her parka and immediately washing her hands in the examination room sink. Contractions about 3 minutes apart. First puppy should be coming soon. Sarah's voice was steady now, professional instincts taking over. I've got the warming box ready. The first puppy arrived at 11:42 p.m., a tiny, wet bundle with dark fur that Sarah quickly cleared of membrane and fluid. The second followed 14 minutes later. Then a third and fourth in rapid succession. Sarah worked mechanically, cleaning airways, cutting umbilical cords, checking each puppy over before placing them in the warming box. 5. Jess counted as the last puppy emerged. 3 girls, 2 boys. But something was wrong with the smallest male. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. Sarah scooped him up, her heart pounding. "Come on, little guy," she whispered, rubbing his tiny body with a towel. Stimulating circulation, she turned him gently, clearing his airway again, then used a tiny bulb syringe to suction any remaining fluid. Nothing. Sarah refused to give up. She placed her fingers around the puppy's chest and began tiny compressions, followed by the gentlest of breaths into his muzzle. "Fight," she commanded. "Your mama fought for you. Now you fight." As if hearing her, the puppy gave a tiny gasp, then another. His little chest began to rise and fall in shallow breaths. "That's it," Sarah coaxed, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "That's it." By dawn, Bella and all 5 puppies were stable. Sarah had called Jack Thompson at 3 a.m., and to his credit, he'd answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "We can take them," he'd said without hesitation when she explained the situation. "Emma's been fixing up the mudroom for foster cases anyway. How soon do you need us to come?" "Now." With morning light filtering through the clinic windows, Sarah faced a new challenge. The county public health inspector, Harold Finch, stood in her reception area, clipboard in hand and a look of bureaucratic determination on his face. "Surprise inspection? Dr. Miller," he announced, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. "We've had some concerns about your adherence to proper disposal protocols." Sarah's stomach clenched. Richard Coleman must have said something. "Of course," she said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I should warn you, we had an emergency case last night. Things might be a bit disorganized." Finch followed her through the clinic, making notes and occasional disapproving noises as they passed Sarah's admittedly cluttered office and the slightly outdated equipment in the examination rooms. As they approached the back room where Bella and her puppies rested, Sarah's mind raced for explanations. "What's in here?" Finch asked, reaching for the door handle. "Post-operative recovery," Sarah said quickly. "I have a—" The door swung open, and Sarah's heart stopped. But instead of Bella and 5 puppies, there was only an empty bed of blankets and the warming box, now unplugged. On the counter was a hastily scrawled note. "Took the family for their new accommodations. Call when Inspector Gadget leaves. J." Sarah could have kissed Jess right then. Instead, she maintained her neutral expression as Finch peered around the empty room, made another note on his clipboard, and moved on. Later that afternoon, with Finch gone and a list of minor violations to address, Sarah drove out to the Thompson place. The farmhouse looked like something from a Christmas card. Smoke curling from the chimney. Holiday lights strung along the porch, despite it being only the first week of December. Inside, Emma led her to the mudroom, now transformed with soft bedding, dim lighting, and a gently whirring space heater. Bella lay in the center, puppies nursing contentedly at her side. "She's remarkable," Emma said softly. Jack tried to help her settle in, but she knew exactly what to do, checked every corner of the room, found the water dish, arranged the bedding to her liking. Sarah knelt beside the dog, who acknowledged her with alert eyes but didn't move away from her nursing puppies. "Almost like she's been trained," Sarah observed, noticing how Bella positioned herself between the puppies and the door, protective, but not aggressive. "That's what Jack said. Watch this." Emma made a hand signal, fingers pinched together, then moving outward, to Sarah's amazement. Bella immediately lay her head down, eyes still alert but body relaxed. "That's a command signal. Professional training." Sarah breathed. "Service dog? Maybe? Or search and rescue?" "Whatever she was," Emma replied. "She's more than just some backyard dog. Someone invested time in her, Makes you wonder how she ended up with a man like Richard Coleman. As if understanding her name had been spoken, Bella's ears perked forward. There was intelligence in those amber eyes, and something else a knowing that seemed to transcend the usual canine awareness. Sarah gently examined each puppy, relieved to find all 5, including the fragile male she'd resuscitated, were thriving. "You're doing great, Bella," she murmured, stroking the dog's head. That evening, as Sarah was closing up the clinic, her phone rang. It was Jess. "I found something," she said without preamble. "When I was cleaning Bella up after the birth, I noticed a strange bump under her skin, near her shoulder blade. I thought it might be a cyst or old injury. But Sarah, I think it's a damaged microchip." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You're sure?" "Almost positive. It feels just like one. But it must be old or partially broken. My scanner picked up fragments of a number, but not enough to trace." Sarah gazed out the window at the falling snow, mind racing. A microchip meant Bella had belonged to someone once, someone who had cared enough to register her. It meant there was a history, a story, and possibly people looking for her. "We need to keep this quiet for now," Sarah said finally. "At least until we know more. If Richard gets wind that Bella might be valuable or belongs to someone else." "Agreed," Jess replied. "But Sarah, if she does belong to someone else, someone who loves her, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Sarah finished. "For now, let's focus on keeping her and those puppies safe and healthy." As she hung up, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. The Thompson farmhouse settled into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Emma, with her decades of teaching experience, kept careful journals documenting each puppy's growth and development. Jack constructed a larger enclosure in the mudroom as the puppies began to explore beyond the nest of blankets. And Bella, ever watchful, allowed herself brief moments of relaxation, even accepting pets from Emma while her puppies slept in a pile of black and tan fur. "Look at this one," Jack said one morning in late December, pointing to the smallest male, the one Sarah had resuscitated at birth. "He's the runt, but he's got the most fight in him." The puppy, whom they'd taken to calling Scout, was indeed the smallest of the litter, but often the first to attempt new challenges, whether climbing over the low barrier Jack had installed or trying to chase his own shadow on the wall. "And this little lady," Emma said, stroking a female with a distinctive white patch on her chest, "is our thinker, watches everything before she acts." They'd named her Sage for her seemingly thoughtful demeanor. The other 3 puppies, Luna, Bear, and Willow, each developed their own personalities as well. Luna, with her curious nature and tendency to howl at the full moon when Emma took them outside for brief excursions. Bear, the largest of the litter, gentle but protective of his siblings, and Willow, slender and graceful, who had taken to following Emma everywhere she went. Sarah visited every few days, bringing supplies and checking on Bella's recovery. The German Shepherd was gaining weight, her coat beginning to regain its luster with proper nutrition and care. But there were still moments when the dog would freeze, ears alert, body tensing at certain sounds, a car door slamming, a man's raised voice from the television, the clink of metal tools. "It's like she's expecting something bad," Jack observed one evening as Bella startled at the sound of his toolbox closing. "Someone did a number on her, that's for sure. But she's never aggressive," Emma added, watching as Bella quickly settled, nuzzling Scout, who had wandered away from his siblings. "Just wary." Jess had been diving deep into research about German Shepherds with professional training. She spent evenings at the clinic with Sarah, scrolling through databases of missing service animals and contacting organizations that train dogs for military, police, and search and rescue work. The partial microchip number doesn't match anything in the standard databases, she explained one snowy night, rubbing her tired eyes. And without more information, we can't just broadcast that we found her. If Richard gets wind that we're looking into Bella's past, he'd want her back, Sarah finished, the thought turning her stomach, especially now that she's proven she can produce healthy puppies. The reality of purebred German Shepherd puppies in a small town like Pinewood hadn't gone unnoticed. Word had begun to spread. Despite their efforts to keep Bella's location private, calls came into the clinic inquiring about those Shepherd puppies and what Sarah planned to do with them. As January deepened, bringing with it temperatures that rarely climbed above freezing, the debate about Bella and her puppy's future grew more complicated. Mayor Wilson had stopped by the clinic personally, his luxury SUV idling outside as he spoke to Sarah in hushed tones. "My wife, Rebecca, has always wanted a German Shepherd," he'd said, his politician's smile never wavering. "Our children would provide an excellent home." Sarah had remained non-committal, explaining that no decisions would be made until the puppies were at least 8 weeks old. What she didn't say was how the thought of separating them from each other and from Bella already felt like a betrayal. The first real complication arrived in the form of Lawrence Tanner, the wealthiest man in 3 counties and owner of most of Pinewood's commercial real estate. He appeared at the Thompson farm unannounced, his black Mercedes looking alien against the backdrop of Jack's battered pickup and weather-worn barn. "Mrs. Thompson," he'd greeted Emma when she answered the door, his voice carrying across the yard to where Sarah was helping Jack reinforce the outdoor enclosure they were building for when the puppies grew larger. "I understand you're fostering a litter of purebred German Shepherds." Emma, never one to be intimidated, had simply folded her arms across her chest. "We're fostering a dog and her puppies. Yes, they're not available to the public, Mr. Tanner. Everything's available for the right price." He'd responded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My daughter's birthday is coming up. She's been asking for a puppy, and I believe in getting the best." Jack had stepped forward then, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Like my wife said, these pups aren't for sale. They're under veterinary care." Tanner's departure had left an unease hanging in the air, one that crystallized into real concern when they learned he'd gone directly to the clinic afterward. "He offered me $5,000, Sarah told them that evening, her voice tight with anger. "For first pick of the litter. Said he could make the paperwork disappear if that was my concern. People like Tanner are used to buying whatever they want," Jack muttered, unconsciously positioning himself between the mudroom door and the outside world. "The problem is," Jess added, having joined them for the discussion, "technically, these puppies don't belong to any of us. And if Richard Coleman decided to challenge what happened—" "I falsified euthanasia records," Sarah said quietly. "I could lose my license." Emma reached over and gripped Sarah's hand. "You did what was right. We'll figure this out." The puppies were 3 weeks old when Jess made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been continuing her research into Bella's possible origins, and had reached out to a contact who worked with a private firm that trained dogs for various security purposes. "I sent him a photo of Bella," she explained, showing them the email exchange on her phone. He says her markings match those of a dog that went through their program about 3 years ago. A dog that was reported missing over a year ago. Missing, Emma echoed. Not sold or given away. Missing, Jess confirmed. The company places dogs with government agencies, private security firms, and occasionally individuals with specific needs. This trainer remembers Bella, though she wasn't called that then because she was exceptional, top of her class in scent detection and tracking. Sarah studied the grainy photo Jess's contact had sent. The resemblance was striking: the same intelligent eyes, the distinctive patterns of black and tan. So she was stolen, or escaped, and was found by Richard, Jess suggested. Either way, she's not just some random German shepherd. She's a highly trained professional working dog, potentially worth tens of thousands of dollars. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to their situation. If Bella had been stolen, there could be an owner searching for her. If she had escaped, she might technically still belong to the training company or whatever agency had purchased her services. We need more information before we do anything, Sarah decided. We can't risk Richard finding out. But we also need to consider that there might be someone out there who has a legitimate claim to her. As January gave way to February, the puppies continued to grow, their personalities becoming more distinct with each passing day. They ventured out of the mudroom into the kitchen, then the living room, exploring their expanding world with characteristic canine curiosity. Bella watched them attentively, but Sarah noticed something interesting in her behavior. She's training them, she remarked to Emma one afternoon, observing how Bella would gently but firmly direct the puppies away from certain areas or correct behaviors with subtle body language. Look how she positions herself. Those aren't just protective instincts, that's deliberate training. Jack noticed the same thing yesterday. Emma agreed. She guided Willow away from his toolbox, not with her teeth like most mother dogs would, but by physically placing herself between Willow and the tools, then using her body to herd her back to the others. These observations only reinforced their belief that Bella had received sophisticated training. She responded to hand signals Jack sometimes made unconsciously, a quick gesture that would send her to her bed, another that seemed to put her on alert. It was as if she was constantly ready for commands, watching their hands and body language for instructions. The story of the rescued mother dog and her puppies had begun to spread beyond Pinewood, despite their efforts to keep it quiet. A local newspaper from the next county over ran a small piece about the pregnant dog saved from euthanasia. The article was mostly focused on Sarah's act of compassion rather than specifics about Bella herself, but it was enough to cause concern. This could lead back to Richard, Jess warned when she saw the article. We need to be prepared if he finds out. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the article appeared, Richard Coleman walked into Sarah's clinic during the middle of afternoon appointments. He didn't look the way Sarah remembered from that December night, disheveled and disinterested. Today he was polished, his expensive coat and leather gloves marking him as someone accustomed to the finer things. "Dr. Miller," he said, his voice carrying to where Sarah was explaining care instructions to Mrs. Abernathy for her elderly cat. "I believe we have something to discuss." Sarah finished with her client, then led Richard to her office, heart pounding, but face composed. "What can I do for you, Mr. Coleman?" "I think you know why I'm here," he said, removing his gloves with deliberate care. "My dog, the one I brought in before Christmas, the German Shepherd. She wasn't euthanized, was she?" Sarah considered denying it, but the calm certainty in his voice told her he already knew the truth. "No, she wasn't." I see. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. And where is she now? That's confidential information regarding a patient under my care, Sarah replied, falling back on professional language. May I ask why you're suddenly interested in a dog you wanted put down? His smile was cold. Because she belongs to me, doctor, and so do her puppies. The same puppies you were willing to have terminated along with their mother. Sarah couldn't keep the edge from her voice. A decision I now regret, he said smoothly. I was going through a difficult time personally, but now I'd like my property returned. The word property made Sarah's skin crawl. Mr. Coleman, there are procedures for this. The dog is under medical supervision, and the puppies are still nursing. I'm aware of the appropriate care requirements, he replied. I've been breeding German Shepherds for years, but I'm willing to be reasonable. I'll allow the puppies to remain where they are until they're 8 weeks old. Then I'll collect them and their mother. After he left, Sarah immediately called Jack and Emma, then Jess. He knows, she told them, and he wants them back. How did he find out? Jack demanded. The newspaper article. Maybe, Sarah suggested, or someone in town talking. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that he's claiming ownership. And legally, she couldn't finish the sentence. Legally, he has a case. Jess finished for her, because Sarah technically stole his property by not euthanizing the dog as requested. The realization settled heavily over all of them, despite knowing in their hearts that Bella deserved better than to return to a man who had been willing to have her killed. The legal reality was stark. In Montana, as in most states, dogs were considered property, and Richard Coleman had documentation showing he had owned Bella for at least 6 months before bringing her to Sarah's clinic. But what about the microchip? Emma asked. If she belonged to someone else before, we need proof, Sarah interrupted. And we need it quickly. Otherwise, in 6 weeks, Richard Coleman walks away with Bella and 5 purebred German Shepherd puppies that he can sell for thousands of dollars each. The search for answers about Bella's past took on new urgency. Jess contacted every training facility that worked with German Shepherds in a 5-state radius. Sarah reached out to colleagues at veterinary schools who might have access to different microchip databases. Emma and Jack focused on making sure Bella and the puppies continued to thrive, each day bringing them closer to both the puppies' independence and the looming deadline of Richard's return. As February progressed, the puppies began eating solid food, their dependence on Bella for nutrition gradually decreasing. Their personalities continued to develop. Scout, the runt, remained the most adventurous. Sage, the thoughtful observer. Luna, vocal and expressive. Bear, gentle but protective. And Willow, elegant and attentive. Bella herself seemed to sense the tension in the household. She became more vigilant, less willing to let the puppies out of her sight. When vehicles she didn't recognize approached the farm, she would herd the puppies back to the mudroom and position herself at the doorway. Alert and ready. She knows something's coming, Jack said one evening, watching as Bella's ears pricked forward at the sound of a car passing on the distant road. Animals have a sense for these things. What none of them realized was just how complicated their situation was about to become. The quiet battle for Bella and her puppies was about to erupt into a public controversy that would divide Pinewood and force each of them to decide just how far they were willing to go to protect a dog who had, in the span of 2 months, become so much more than just an animal to all of them, for Sarah. The stakes were professional as well as personal. For Jack and Emma, it was about the sanctity of their home and their role as protectors. For Jess, who had been spending more and more time at the Thompson farm helping with the puppies, it was about justice for animals who couldn't speak for themselves. And for Bella, who watched them all with knowing eyes while her puppies tumbled and played in growing confidence, it was about finding a place of safety after what had clearly been a long journey marked by both professional training and subsequent mistreatment. None of them could have predicted how their lives would intertwine, or how the battle for one dog's future would reveal secrets that had been buried in Pinewood for years, as February's snows began to melt, revealing patches of earth beneath. The truth about Bella and about Richard Coleman's operation was slowly emerging as well, like the first green shoots of spring pushing through the frozen ground. The first week of March brought an unexpected thaw to Pinewood. Snow retreated from roadsides, revealing months of accumulated debris. The Thompson property transformed from a pristine white landscape to a patchwork of melting snow and muddy earth. Jack had taken to laying wooden planks as walkways between the house and barn, while Emma kept a basket of old towels by the door to wipe 16 paws Bella's and her 5 growing puppies each time they came inside. Sarah pulled into the Thompsons' driveway on a Wednesday afternoon. Her clinic closed early due to a scheduled power outage in town. As she climbed out of her truck, Bella appeared at the farmhouse door. Her posture alert but not alarmed, she had come to recognize the sound of Sarah's engine. "Hey there, beautiful," Sarah greeted, kneeling to scratch behind Bella's ears. The German Shepherd leaned into her touch, briefly, before turning and trotting back inside, her way of inviting Sarah to follow. In the living room, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, supervising as the puppies wrestled over a rope toy. At nearly 9 weeks old, they were proper dogs now, still puppy-clumsy, but showing distinct personalities and behaviors that hinted at the adults they would become. "They're getting so big," Sarah remarked, settling onto the couch. Emma nodded, her face more drawn than usual. "Jack's in town meeting with Frank Lewis." Frank Lewis was Pinewood's only attorney, a semi-retired lawyer who handled everything from real estate transactions to the occasional DUI case. That Jack was meeting with him confirmed what Sarah already suspected: they were preparing for a legal battle over Bella and her puppies. "Any news on your end?" Emma asked. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. "Jess found something. The training facility that we think Bella came from, Highland Working Dogs out of Colorado, sent over these records." She laid out several photographs showing German Shepherds in training. There, in 3 of the images, was a dog that bore a striking resemblance to Bella, though younger and with a glossier coat. "They called her Athena," Sarah explained. "She completed advanced training in search and rescue, with additional certification in cadaver detection. She was placed with the county sheriff's department in eastern Colorado 2 years ago. But 8 months into her service, she disappeared during a training exercise in remote terrain." Emma studied the photos, her teacher's eyes cataloging details. "It's her," she confirmed softly. "Look at that pattern of darker fur along her spine, and that small white mark under her chin. Highland is sending someone to verify with a DNA test, but they're pretty confident, too. They've already spoken with the sheriff's department. Apparently, they spent weeks searching for her. The handler was devastated. So she was stolen," Emma concluded. "Or she got lost and someone found her," Sarah countered, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Either way, if she is Athena, then Richard Coleman is not her legitimate owner." The relief that flooded Emma's features was palpable. "This changes everything. It gives us a fighting chance," Sarah corrected. "But it complicates things, too," If Bella is Athena, she technically belongs to either Highland or the Colorado Sheriff's Department, depending on their contract. They were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Emma moved to the window, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. "It's Richard Coleman, and he's not alone." Sarah joined her at the window. Richard's sleek black Audi had pulled up alongside a Pinewood County Sheriff's vehicle. Deputy Morris, a young officer who'd only been with the department for a year, stepped out and adjusted his hat before following Richard toward the house. "Get the puppies into the mudroom," Sarah instructed quickly. "I'll handle this." Emma efficiently rounded up the squirming puppies, herding them and Bella into the mudroom and closing the door just as a knock sounded at the front entrance. Sarah straightened her shoulders and went to answer. "Dr. Miller," Richard greeted, feigning surprise. "I wasn't expecting to find you here." "Mr. Coleman," Sarah replied coolly. "Deputy Morris." The young deputy nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am?" "We're here about my property," Richard stated, his tone businesslike. "I've been patient, allowed the puppies to reach weaning age as we discussed. Now I've come to collect them and their mother." Sarah stood her ground in the doorway. "There's been a development. Mr. Coleman, we have reason to believe the dog you claim as yours was actually stolen from her rightful owners. Until that's resolved, I'm afraid I can't allow you to take her or the puppies." Richard's expression hardened, but he maintained his composed exterior. "That's a serious accusation. Doctor, do you have proof?" "We're awaiting confirmation. But yes, we have substantial evidence." Richard turned to the deputy. "Officer, I have registration papers showing I've owned this dog for over a year. I have witnesses who can attest to seeing her on my property. These people have effectively stolen my property and are now refusing to return it." Deputy Morris shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Dr. Miller, if Mr. Coleman has documentation—" "His documentation is fraudulent," Sarah interrupted, "and I can prove it once the representatives from Highland Working Dogs arrive to identify Bella." "Highland Working Dogs," Richard repeated, a flicker of something recognition concern crossing his features before he masked it. "I've never heard of them." "They train specialized service dogs," Sarah explained, "including a German shepherd named Athena, who disappeared from Colorado approximately 10 months ago. A dog that matches Bella's description exactly, down to distinctive markings and a partially damaged microchip." Deputy Morris looked between them, clearly out of his depth. "Look, I'm not authorized to make judgments about disputed ownership, but if there's a legitimate question here, this might need to go before a judge." "Fine," Richard snapped, his mask of civility slipping. "I'll file a formal complaint and petition for immediate return of my property. In the meantime, Deputy, I want it on record that these people are in possession of animals that legally belong to me." "So noted, sir," Morris replied, pulling out a small notepad and making a notation. He turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, I suggest you contact the sheriff's office directly about this ownership dispute. In cases like this, the court generally requires the contested property to remain where it is until a hearing." After they departed, Sarah sagged against the doorframe, the confrontation leaving her drained. Emma emerged from the mudroom, closing the door softly behind her. "How much time do you think we have?" she asked. "Not much," Sarah admitted. "Richard knows people in this town. He'll push for an expedited hearing." The next morning, Sarah was served with papers at the clinic. Richard Coleman was suing her for theft of property, filing for immediate return of one female German Shepherd and her 5 offspring, and seeking damages for emotional distress and lost breeding potential. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, just 5 days away. News of the lawsuit spread through Pinewood like wildfire. By noon, Sarah had received calls from 3 clients canceling appointments, citing concerns about her professional judgment. By evening, the local Facebook community page was filled with heated debates, with residents divided between those who supported Sarah's compassionate intervention and those who believed Richard's property rights were sacrosanct. "It's getting ugly out there," Jess reported when she arrived at the Thompson farm that evening for an emergency strategy session. Someone spray-painted "Dog Thief" on the clinic's dumpster. Jack, who had returned from his meeting with Frank Lewis looking grim, spread legal documents across the kitchen table. "Frank says our position is precarious," he explained. "Even with the evidence from Highland, we're facing an uphill battle. Coleman has owned Bella or Athena for months, maybe longer. In the eyes of Montana law, that could constitute established ownership." "What about the microchip?" Emma demanded. "What about the training documentation?" "It helps," Jack conceded. "But it doesn't guarantee anything, especially since Sarah—" He trailed off, looking apologetically at the veterinarian. "Since I falsified euthanasia records," Sarah finished flatly. "Let's call it what it is. I broke the law, even if it was for the right reasons." "The representative from Highland arrives tomorrow," Jess reminded them. "Once we have DNA confirmation, that still leaves us with only 3 days before the hearing," Emma interrupted. "And Richard knows exactly what he's doing. He's counting on the court to rule based on property law, not on what's best for Bella or the puppies." The mood around the table was somber. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the March night still carrying winter's chill. From the mudroom came the occasional soft bark or playful growl as the puppies settled for the night. "There's something else," Sarah said after a long silence. "If Richard pushes this and it goes to a full hearing, I could lose my veterinary license. Falsifying medical records is grounds for permanent revocation." "You did it to save a life," Jess protested. "That won't matter to the licensing board," Sarah replied. "I knew the risks when I made that decision." The weight of her potential sacrifice hung in the air. For Sarah, being a veterinarian wasn't just a career, it was her identity, her purpose. Losing her license would mean losing everything she had worked for since she was 18 years old. "We need a better strategy," Jack declared finally. "Frank's handling the legal end, but we need public opinion on our side too. In a town this small, that matters." It was Jess who came up with the plan. As the youngest among them and the most social media savvy, she recognized the power of narrative in shaping public perception. "We need to tell Bella's story," she explained. "Not just the part about Sarah saving her from euthanasia, but everything how she trains her puppies, her obvious professional background, the evidence of mistreatment under Richard's ownership." "Richard has influence in this town," Emma cautioned. "People might not want to publicly oppose him, but they love their pets," Jess countered. "And they trust Sarah with their animals' lives. We need to remind them of that." The next morning brought another surprise, though this one more welcome. The local newspaper, the Pinewood Chronicle, ran a front-page story about the dispute. The journalist, a young woman named Melissa Chen, who had recently moved to Pinewood from Chicago, had done her research, presenting both sides but including detailed information about search and rescue dogs and the specialized training they received. "Public pressure works both ways," Jess said triumphantly. spreading the newspaper on the clinic's reception desk. Richard might have influence, but he also cares about his reputation. The Highland representative, a former military dog handler named Marcus Webb, arrived that afternoon. Sarah closed the clinic early and drove him directly to the Thompson farm, where Bella was waiting in the living room, puppies napping in the mudroom. The moment Marcus entered, Bella's entire demeanor changed. Her ears pricked forward, her body tensed, and then, as Marcus knelt and made a specific hand gesture, she immediately dropped to a perfect down position, eyes fixed on him attentively. "That's her," Marcus confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "That's Athena." He spent the next hour putting Bella through a series of commands hand signals, verbal cues in both English and German, and complex sequences that had her moving in precise patterns around the room. She performed flawlessly, muscle memory taking over after months without practice. "She was one of our best," Marcus explained as he collected DNA samples for official confirmation. "Cost nearly $30,000 to train. The sheriff's department was devastated when she disappeared. Her handler, Deputy Rodriguez, spent weeks searching the mountains where she went missing." "How do you think she ended up in Montana?" Jack asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "There's a black market for trained working dogs, military dogs, police canines. Search and rescue, they're valuable because of their training. Someone could have found her, recognized her value, and sold her. To Richard Coleman," Sarah suggested, "or to someone who then sold her to him." Marcus replied, "Either way, Athena's rightful owner is the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department in Colorado. Once we confirm her identity with these DNA samples, they'll want her back." The statement landed like a stone in still water, ripples of realization spreading across their faces. In their determination to keep Bella from returning to Richard, they hadn't fully considered the implication of finding her original owners. "What about the puppies?" Emma asked, voicing what they were all thinking. "Technically, they belong to the sheriff's department too, as offspring of their property," Marcus admitted, "but realistically, they probably won't want 5 puppies. They'd likely allow them to be rehomed appropriately." As Marcus departed with his samples, promising results within 48 hours, the group faced a new reality. Victory against Richard might mean losing Bella anyway, sending her back to Colorado, away from the puppies she had raised and the people who had protected her. One battle at a time, Sarah reminded them. "First, we keep her away from Richard, then we figure out what's truly best for Bella or Athena and her puppies." That evening, as the controversy continued to swirl through Pinewood, Jess made a discovery that would change everything. She had been helping Sarah update the clinic's social media with educational posts about working dogs when she paused, staring at her phone with an expression of shock. "Sarah," she said slowly, "I think I'm pregnant." Sarah looked up from her computer. "What?" "I'm late," Jess explained, her voice wavering between fear and wonder. 3 weeks late. I've been so wrapped up in everything with Bella that I didn't even notice, but now that I think about it, the fatigue, the nausea in the mornings." "Have you taken a test?" Sarah asked gently. Jess shook her head. "I've been afraid, too. After the miscarriages, David and I stopped hoping. The doctor said my chances were practically zero." Sarah reached for her keys. "Let's go to the pharmacy right now." An hour later, in the privacy of Sarah's apartment above the clinic, they stared at the plastic test stick with its unmistakable double lines. Positive. "How is this possible?" Jess whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We tried for 3 years, fertility treatments, special diets, everything, Sarah embraced her friend, her own eyes damp. Sometimes miracles happen when we least expect them. Gigi. That night, as Jess called her husband David with the news, as Jack and Emma watched over Bella and her growing puppies, as Richard Coleman made calls to influential friends about the upcoming hearing, and as Marcus Webb sent DNA samples to a specialized lab, the disparate threads of their lives began to weave together into a pattern none of them could have anticipated. The battle for Bella was about to reach its climax, with consequences that would ripple through all their lives in ways both devastating and profoundly transformative. The county courthouse stood on Pinewood's main street, a century-old edifice of red brick and white columns that had witnessed generations of the town's triumphs and sorrows. On Monday morning, a light rain fell, turning the remaining patches of snow to slush and casting a gray pall over the proceedings about to unfold inside. Sarah arrived early, dressed in a conservative navy suit she normally reserved for veterinary conferences. Jack and Emma Thompson followed, Emma clutching a folder of photographs documenting Bella's remarkable recovery and the growth of her puppies. Jess, still processing her unexpected pregnancy news, had stationed herself at the Thompson farm to keep watch over Bella and the puppies, armed with Jack's old shotgun not loaded, but imposing enough to give pause to anyone who might attempt to take matters into their own hands. Judge Martha Holbrook presided over Pinewood's civil court, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for strict adherence to the letter of the law. As the small courtroom filled, it seemed half the town had turned out for the proceedings. Sarah caught sight of Marcus Webb from Highland Working Dogs, sitting near the back, his expression grave. The DNA results had arrived that morning. Bella was indeed Athena, the missing search and rescue dog from Colorado. Richard Coleman entered with his attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit who had clearly been imported from Helena or Missoula. No local lawyer would have such perfectly tailored clothing or such an air of metropolitan disdain. Richard himself looked confident, nodding to several prominent townspeople as he made his way to the plaintiff's table. Frank Lewis, representing Sarah and the Thompsons, squeezed Sarah's arm reassuringly as they took their seats. "Remember," he whispered, "stick to the facts. Let me handle the legal arguments." Judge Holbrook called the court to order precisely at 9:00 a.m. After the preliminary statements, Richard's attorney, who introduced himself as James Harrington of the prestigious firm Harrington, Meyer, and Doyle, presented their case with practiced eloquence. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of property rights," he began. "My client, Mr. Coleman, has owned this animal for over a year, as documented by these registration papers and veterinary records. On December 12th, he brought the dog to Dr. Miller's clinic for humane euthanasia, a difficult but legal decision he was entitled to make as the animal's owner. Instead, Dr. Miller not only refused to perform the requested service, but actively concealed the animal, and has since refused to return Mr. Coleman's property. Furthermore, the animal has since whelped 5 puppies, which are legally the property of my client as the owner of the mother. Judge Holbrook listened impassively, making occasional notes. "And the reason for the requested euthanasia?" she inquired. Harrington hesitated fractionally. "My client discovered the dog was pregnant and did not wish to deal with the responsibilities of a litter." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Holbrook tapped her gavel once, silencing the whispers. "Your Honor," Frank Lewis began when it was his turn, his folksy manner a stark contrast to Harrington's slick presentation. "This case is far from straightforward. We have reason to believe in fact. We now have scientific confirmation that the dog in question was not legitimately Mr. Coleman's property to begin with. He proceeded to lay out the evidence they had gathered: the damaged microchip, Highland Working Dog's records, and most decisively, the DNA test confirming Bella was indeed Athena, the missing search and rescue dog from Colorado. Furthermore, Frank continued, we have expert testimony that this dog received specialized training valued at approximately $30,000, making her a significant asset to her rightful owners, the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department. We believe Mr. Coleman knew or should have known that this was not an ordinary stray dog, given her advanced training and behavior. As Frank spoke, Sarah watched Richard's face. His expression remained neutral, but she noticed a tightness around his eyes, a subtle tension in his jaw. He had known, she realized, he had known exactly what Bella was when he'd acquired her. The testimony proceeded throughout the morning. Marcus Webb explained the specialized training Athena had received and the circumstances of her disappearance. Sarah testified about Bella's condition when Richard brought her in, the signs of neglect and malnourishment that had contributed to her decision to save the dog. And you falsified official medical records, Harrington pointed out during cross-examination, his tone making the question an accusation. Yes, Sarah admitted, meeting Judge Holbrook's eyes directly. I did. I made a professional judgment that euthanizing a healthy pregnant dog was not ethically justified, especially given her condition when presented. Wasn't that Mr. Coleman's decision to make, as the dog's owner? Harrington pressed. I believed then, and evidence has since confirmed, that Mr. Coleman was not the dog's rightful owner. Sarah replied steadily. After several hours of testimony, Judge Holbrook called a brief recess. In the courthouse hallway, Frank Lewis huddled with Sarah and the Thompsons. It's not going well, he admitted quietly. Judge Holbrook is a stickler for property law. Even with the evidence of Bella's true identity, the fact remains that Richard had possession of her for a significant period, and Sarah did technically violate protocols regarding euthanasia. What about the Colorado Sheriff's Department? Emma asked. Don't they have a stronger claim than Richard? They would, Frank agreed, if they were here to make it, but they haven't officially entered the case yet. Marcus can testify to Bella's identity, but he doesn't have legal standing to claim her on the department's behalf. When court resumed, Judge Holbrook rendered her decision with clinical precision. While I find the evidence regarding the dog's original identity compelling, she stated, the case before me today is specifically about Mr. Coleman's property claim versus Dr. Miller's actions. On that narrow legal question, I must rule in favor of the plaintiff. Dr. Miller did not have legal authority to countermand Mr. Coleman's instructions regarding his property, regardless of her ethical concerns. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as Judge Holbrook continued, Therefore, I am ordering the immediate return of the animal in question and her offspring to Mr. Coleman. Furthermore, Dr. Miller's actions in falsifying medical records will be referred to the State Veterinary Licensing Board for review. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Emma began to weep silently, while Jack put his arm around her shoulders, his face a mask of restrained anger. Sarah sat immobile, the judge's words echoing in her mind. She had lost Bella. She had likely lost her career, and for what Richard Coleman looked over at their table, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't the expression of a man who cared about an animal's welfare. It was the look of someone who had won a valuable prize. Judge Holbrook banged her gavel. The dog and puppies are to be transferred to Mr. Coleman by 5:00 p.m. today. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, a light snow had begun to fall. the earlier rain turning to delicate white flakes that dissolved upon contact with the wet pavement. Sarah stood on the steps, numb with defeat, barely hearing Frank's assurances that they would appeal, that this wasn't over. "Sarah," Marcus approached, his expression grim. "I just got off the phone with Deputy Rodriguez from Colorado. He's on his way here with the department's legal counsel. They're prepared to file an emergency injunction, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning." "It's too late," Sarah replied hollowly. "We have to surrender Bella Athena to Richard tonight." The drive back to the Thompson farm was conducted in sorrowful silence. How would they explain to Jess? How would they separate Bella from her puppies? The court order had been explicit. All 6 dogs were to be returned to Richard Coleman. As they turned onto the gravel road leading to the farmhouse, Jack suddenly slammed on the brakes. "My God!" Emma gasped. The house, ahead of them, smoke billowed from the Thompsons' farmhouse. Flames visible through the kitchen windows. Parked haphazardly in the yard was Jess's car, its door hanging open. "Jess!" Sarah cried, leaping from the vehicle before it had fully stopped. "The puppies!" The tragedy they had feared most was unfolding before their eyes, more devastating than anything they could have imagined. Sarah raced toward the burning farmhouse, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jack and Emma were close behind, their footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. Through the kitchen window, flames licked up the curtains, casting an orange glow that seemed obscene against the gray March sky. "Jess!" Sarah shouted, reaching the front porch. "Bella, where are you?" The front door burst open, and Jess staggered out, coughing violently. Her face was smudged with soot, her red hair singed at the ends. In her arms, she clutched Scout, the smallest puppy, who was squirming and whimpering. "Thank God," Emma breathed, rushing forward to help Jess down the porch steps. "Are you hurt?" Jess shook her head, still coughing. "Bella," she managed between gasps. She went back in. The other puppies. Jack was already moving toward the door, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "Wait. Look." From around the side of the house came Bella, her fur matted with soot, carrying Sage by the scruff of her neck. The German shepherd deposited the puppy next to Jess, turned, and before anyone could stop her, raced back into the burning building. "She's getting them out," Sarah realized aloud. "She's rescuing her puppies." Within moments, Bella reappeared with Luna, then disappeared again. The heat from the fire was intensifying, the crackle of burning wood growing louder. Jack had retrieved a garden hose and was spraying water at the base of the flames, but it was clearly inadequate for the growing blaze. "I've called 911, Emma shouted over the noise, her cell phone clutched in her shaking hand. "Fire department's on the way." Bella emerged once more, this time with Bear, the largest puppy, struggling in her grip. She set him down gently next to his siblings, who huddled together on the grass. Then, with a determined look that Sarah would later swear showed human-like calculation, the dog plunged back into the inferno. "Willow!" Jess gasped. "She's still looking for Willow." Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The fire was spreading to the living room now. In the distance, sirens wailed, but Sarah knew the volunteer fire department would take at least 15 minutes to reach the remote farmhouse. "She's been in there too long," Jack said, his voice tight with fear. "I'm going in after her." "Jack! No!" Emma grabbed her husband's arm, her face pale with terror, before Jack could break free of Emma's grip. A flash of movement caught Sarah's eye. There, emerging from a side window that had shattered from the heat, was Bella. In her mouth, she carried Willow, the slender, graceful puppy appearing lifeless in her mother's grasp. Bella staggered across the yard, her strength clearly failing. Sarah ran to meet her, catching Willow as Bella gently released her. The puppy wasn't breathing. Without hesitation, Sarah began CPR, her veterinary training taking over. She placed her mouth over Willow's muzzle, delivering small breaths, then used her fingers to compress the tiny chest. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured between breaths. "Come on." Beside her, Bella collapsed onto the grass, her sides heaving with exhaustion. The other puppies crawled toward their mother, whimpering and nuzzling against her. Jack and Emma had gathered around Sarah, their faces etched with worry as she worked to revive Willow. Finally, miraculously, the puppy gave a small cough, then drew a shuddering breath. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, but alive. "That's it?" Sarah encouraged, relief flooding through her. "Good girl." As the Pinewood Volunteer Fire Department arrived and began battling the blaze, Sarah examined Bella and the puppies. Aside from minor burns and smoke inhalation, they had all escaped serious injury thanks entirely to Bella's courage and determination. "What happened?" Jack asked Jess, who sat wrapped in a blanket provided by a paramedic, an oxygen mask temporarily covering her face. She pulled the mask away to answer. "I was in the kitchen with the puppies." Bella started acting strange, pacing, whining, then she bolted for the mudroom door. Jess paused, coughing. "Next thing I knew, there was smoke coming from the living room, an electrical fire. I think it spread so fast. The farmhouse, despite the firefighters' best efforts, was severely damaged. The kitchen and living room were destroyed, and smoke and water had ruined much of the remaining structure." As twilight descended, the Thompsons stood with Sarah, Jess, and the dogs, watching as the firefighters extinguished the last of the flames. "You can all stay with me," Sarah offered, looking at the shell of what had been a warm, welcoming home. "My apartment above the clinic isn't big, but we'll manage." Emma nodded numbly, still processing the destruction of their home of 30 years. "At least we're all safe," she said finally. "Thanks to Bella." The name hung in the air, a reminder of their other pressing concern. According to Judge Holbrook's ruling, they were required to surrender Bella and her puppies to Richard Coleman by 5:00 p.m. It was now nearly 6:30. "I need to call Frank," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "The court order. Let the son of a bitch come here himself if he wants them so badly." Jack growled, an uncharacteristic fury in his voice. "After what she just did, saving her puppies from the fire, I'd like to see him try to take her." Their confrontation with Richard, however, would come sooner than expected, as they were loading the dogs into Sarah's truck to transport them to the clinic. A black Audi pulled up, followed by a sheriff's department vehicle. Richard Coleman stepped out, his expression a mixture of impatience and annoyance. "You're late," he said without preamble. The court ordered transfer by 5 o'clock. "There's been an emergency," Sarah replied, gesturing toward the smoldering farmhouse. "As you can see." Richard's gaze flickered to the fire damage, then back to the dogs in the truck bed. "Unfortunate," he said, his tone suggesting he found it merely inconvenient. "But it doesn't change the court's decision. Deputy Morris here will witness the transfer." Deputy Morris, looking deeply uncomfortable, nodded. "I'm sorry, Dr. Miller. I have to enforce the judge's order." Sarah felt a surge of desperation. These animals need medical attention. They've suffered smoke inhalation. possible burns. As a veterinarian, I can't in good conscience release them without proper evaluation. Then evaluate them at my facility. Richard countered smoothly. I have adequate kennels and resources. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, if not for an unexpected interruption, the sound of another vehicle approaching. A mud-spattered pickup truck with Colorado plates pulled up, and two men stepped out. One wore the uniform of the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department, a gold badge gleaming on his chest. "Deputy Rodriguez," Marcus Webb exclaimed, emerging from his own car where he'd been making calls. "You made good time." The officer, a stocky man in his 40s with close-cropped salt and pepper hair, nodded grimly. "Drove straight through." His eyes fell on Bella, who was sitting alert in the truck bed, surrounded by her puppies. "Athena," he breathed, his professional demeanor briefly cracking to reveal raw emotion. The man beside him, dressed in a rumpled suit, stepped forward. "I'm David Patterson, legal counsel for Clear Creek County. We've filed an emergency injunction in federal court regarding ownership of the canine officer known as Athena." He handed papers to Deputy Morris. "This supersedes the local ruling until a federal judge can review the case." Richard's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd! That dog is my property, confirmed by a judge not 6 hours ago." "That ruling is now under review," Patterson replied calmly. "The federal injunction prohibits any transfer of ownership until the hearing, which is scheduled for Wednesday morning." Deputy Morris reviewed the papers, then nodded reluctantly. "These appear to be in order. Mr. Coleman, I can't enforce Judge Holbrook's ruling until this federal matter is resolved." Richard's composed facade finally cracked. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "That dog and her puppies are worth thousands. You can't just—" "Worth thousands," Deputy Rodriguez interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "You seem very concerned about the monetary value of a service animal." "Mr. Coleman." Richard fell silent, seeming to realize his mistake. He turned to his car, pausing only to deliver a final threat. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." As his Audi disappeared down the road, the group collectively exhaled. They had gained a temporary reprieve, but the battle for Bella was far from over. At the clinic, Sarah examined Bella and each puppy carefully. All had inhaled smoke, and Bella had burns on her paws from repeatedly entering the burning building. But with proper treatment, they would recover fully. As she applied salve to Bella's injured paws, Deputy Rodriguez watched silently, his expression a mixture of awe and sorrow. "She was the best search dog I ever worked with," he said finally. "When she disappeared during that training exercise, I spent weeks searching. I couldn't believe she'd just vanished." "How do you think she ended up with Richard Coleman?" Sarah asked, securing a light bandage around Bella's paw. Rodriguez shook his head. "There's a black market for trained working dogs. Someone must have found her, recognized her value, and sold her." He hesitated. "The thing is, Coleman's name has come up before in investigations into illegal dog trading, nothing we could ever prove. But—" "You think he knowingly purchased a stolen dog?" Jack asked from where he sat with Emma near the examination table. "It would explain his eagerness to have her euthanized when he discovered she was pregnant," Sarah suggested. "If the puppies drew attention, someone might have recognized her as a missing search dog." As the pieces began to fall into place, a new understanding dawned. Richard Coleman wasn't just a callous pet owner. He was potentially involved in something much darker, a network that trafficked in stolen service animals. The next morning brought two significant developments. First, The insurance investigator examining the Thompson farmhouse made a disturbing discovery. The fire hadn't been electrical, as they'd initially assumed. It had been deliberately set. Someone had placed an accelerant in the living room and lit it, timing it to ignite shortly after they'd left for court. The second revelation came from an unexpected source. Michael Wilson, Pinewood's mayor, arrived at the clinic just after it opened, his usual political confidence replaced by visible nervousness. "I need to speak with you privately. Dr. Miller," he requested, glancing around the waiting room as if expecting to be observed. In her office, Mayor Wilson sank into a chair, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I've heard about what happened at the Thompson place," he began. "The fire, the court case, everything. It's been a difficult few days," Sarah acknowledged cautiously, unsure why the mayor was there. "There's something you should know about Richard Coleman," Wilson continued, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. "Something I should have said years ago." Sarah leaned forward, sensing they were about to learn the missing piece of the puzzle. "Richard Coleman is my brother," Mayor Wilson confessed. "My half-brother, to be precise. Different fathers, same mother. We haven't acknowledged the relationship publicly since I entered politics. He has a complicated history that wouldn't reflect well on me." Sarah stared at him, stunned by the revelation. "Your brother?" Wilson nodded, shame evident in his expression. "Growing up, Richard always had a way of acquiring things that didn't belong to him. Our mother called it his gift. I called it stealing." He sighed heavily. "When he moved to Pinewood 5 years ago, I thought maybe he'd changed. But then I started hearing rumors about his breeding operation, dogs appearing and disappearing, unusual breeds with advanced training." "You knew," Sarah realized, anger rising in her throat. "You knew what he was doing, and you said nothing." "I suspected," Wilson corrected, "but I had no proof. And he's family. You understand how complicated that is." He straightened in his chair. "But this has gone too far. The fire at the Thompson place that crosses a line I can't ignore. I'm going to the sheriff today with everything I know about Richard's operation." As Mayor Wilson left, Sarah sat motionless at her desk, processing the implications of what she'd just learned. The pieces were falling into place. Richard's acquisition of Bella, his attempt to have her euthanized when she became inconvenient, his desperate legal battle to reclaim her and her valuable puppies. But the most shocking revelation, that Richard was related to Pinewood's mayor, added a new dimension to the case. It explained how Richard had operated unchecked for so long, how he'd cultivated influence in the town despite being a relative newcomer. Sarah reached for her phone to call Deputy Rodriguez. With Mayor Wilson's testimony and the evidence of arson at the Thompson farm, they might finally have enough to stop Richard Coleman permanently and secure Bella's future once and for all. The federal courthouse in Helena was a far cry from Pinewood's modest county building. Marble columns rose to a vaulted ceiling, and polished wood gleamed in the morning light that streamed through tall windows. Sarah sat with Jack and Emma on one side of the courtroom, while Deputy Rodriguez and the legal team from Clear Creek County occupied the row behind them. Across the aisle, Richard Coleman sat alone, his expensive attorney whispering urgently in his ear. The past 36 hours had been a whirlwind of revelations and preparations. After Mayor Wilson's confession, he had indeed gone to the county sheriff with his knowledge of Richard's activities. A search warrant had been executed at Richard's property, revealing a sophisticated breeding operation with documentation suggesting several of his prized German shepherds had questionable origins. More damning still, investigators had found accelerant matching that used in the Thompson fire, along with receipts showing Richard had purchased it the day before the court hearing. Richard had been arrested on suspicion of arson. Though he'd been quickly released on bail pending further investigation, his demeanor at this federal hearing was markedly different from his confident posturing at the county courthouse. His face was drawn, his eyes constantly darting toward the doors as if contemplating escape. Judge Eleanor Simmons, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, called the court to order precisely at 9:00 a.m. Unlike Judge Holbrook's narrow focus on property rights, Judge Simmons seemed intent on understanding the full context of the case. "This is a rather unusual situation," she observed after the attorneys had made their opening statements. "We have a service animal that disappeared from Colorado, somehow ended up in Montana, and is now the subject of competing claims. I want to be clear about the timeline and the facts before making any ruling." Deputy Rodriguez was called first, his testimony painting a vivid picture of Athena's exemplary service record and the desperate search that followed her disappearance. "She saved 3 lives during her time with our department," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "A lost child in the mountains, an elderly man with dementia who wandered from his home during a snowstorm, and a hiker buried in an avalanche. Athena wasn't just equipment, she was my partner." The Clear Creek County attorney presented documentation of Athena's extensive training, her microchip registration, and photographs that clearly matched Bella's distinctive markings. When it was Richard's attorney's turn for cross-examination, his questions seemed half-hearted, as if he already knew they were fighting a losing battle. Sarah testified next, describing her first encounter with Bella, the evidence of neglect, and her decision to save the dog rather than euthanize her. "And what is your assessment of the dog's current condition?" Judge Simmons asked. "She's recovering well from the burns she sustained rescuing her puppies from the fire," Sarah replied. "Her training is still intact. Deputy Rodriguez ran her through some commands yesterday, and she performed perfectly. She's also proven to be an exceptional mother." Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully. "And the puppies? What condition are they in?" "Healthy and thriving, despite the trauma of the fire. They're 9 weeks old now, normally an appropriate age for weaning and adoption. But given recent events, we've kept them with Bella for additional security and comfort." When Richard took the stand, his usual composure had completely abandoned him. He claimed to have purchased Bella, whom he called Diana, from a man at a dog show in Idaho, though he couldn't provide the seller's name or any documentation of the transaction. "And you were unaware that this dog had specialized training?" Judge Simmons pressed. "I noticed she was unusually obedient," Richard admitted. "But many German shepherds are intelligent and responsive to training." "Yet you didn't question why a highly trained, purebred German shepherd was being sold without papers at a dog show." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I got a good deal. I didn't ask too many questions." By noon, the evidence was overwhelmingly against Richard's claim. Judge Simmons called a brief recess before announcing her decision. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Sarah found herself standing near Deputy Rodriguez, who was studying a photograph of Bella and her puppies that Emma had given him. "She looks happy," he observed quietly. "Healthier than when I last saw her." "She is," Sarah confirmed. "She's thriving, especially since she's been with the Thompsons." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens if the court awards her back to your department? Will you take her back to Colorado?" Rodriguez sighed, tucking the photo into his pocket. "Honestly, I'm torn. She was the best search dog I ever worked with, but she's built a new life here, with these puppies, and after what she's been through, he shook his head. I need to do what's best for her, not just what would be convenient for the department." When court resumed, Judge Simmons delivered her ruling with decisive clarity. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, I find that the dog known as both Athena and Bella is legally the property of the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department. The microchip identification, training records, and DNA testing leave no room for doubt. Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat. But Judge Simmons wasn't finished. However, given the unusual circumstances of this case, including the dog's recent motherhood, the trauma she has experienced, and the attachments she has formed, I am ordering a 30-day transition period. During this time, Clear Creek County and Dr. B. Miller, along with the Thompson family who have been caring for the dog, will develop a plan that serves the best interests of both the animal and the public service role for which she was trained. The judge turned her attention directly to Richard. As for Mr. Coleman's claim, it is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, given the evidence suggesting Mr. Coleman knowingly acquired stolen property, I am referring this matter to the USOS Attorney's Office for potential federal charges related to interstate trafficking of stolen service animals. Outside the courthouse, beneath a sky that had finally cleared to reveal Montana's legendary blue expanse, Sarah stood with Jack, Emma, and Jess, absorbing their victory. It wasn't perfect. Bella's future still hung in a delicate balance, but Richard's threat had been neutralized, and they had 30 days to find a solution that would serve everyone's interests, especially Bella's. "What now?" Jess asked, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat abdomen, where new life was growing. "Now we rebuild," Jack answered simply, his arm around Emma's shoulders. Their home insurance would cover the reconstruction of their farmhouse, though it would take months before they could move back in. "And we find the right homes for the puppies," Emma added, though her voice held a note of sadness at the thought of parting with the dogs they had come to love. "One day at a time," Sarah said, watching as Deputy Rodriguez knelt to greet Bella, who recognized him with cautious friendliness but kept glancing back at Sarah and the Thompsons, as if ensuring her family was still nearby. "For now, let's just be grateful we all made it through." As they walked toward their vehicles, Sarah noticed Mayor Wilson standing near the courthouse steps. His face was drawn. The political mask dropped to reveal genuine regret. When their eyes met, he nodded once, an acknowledgment of both his past failings and his recent courage in finally standing against his brother. In that moment, Sarah understood that the story of Bella or Athena had changed not just the dog's life, but all of theirs. It had exposed secrets, tested values, and ultimately revealed the true character of everyone involved. In a town as small as Pinewood, those revelations would ripple outward for years to come. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The pregnant German shepherd who had shed tears in a veterinary clinic 4 months ago had found her voice and her power. Whatever path she took from here, it would be one chosen with love, rather than imposed by cruelty. And for now, that was enough. As the seasons changed in Pinewood, Bella's story became a testament to what matters most in our twilight years: courage in the face of adversity and the family we choose. Like many of us who've weathered life's storms, this German shepherd carried hidden wounds but never lost her capacity for love. When flames threatened her puppies, she didn't hesitate. She returned again and again into that burning house, just as you've repeatedly put yourselves in harm's way for those you cherish. Remember when you worked double shifts to put children through college, or nursed loved ones through illness while ignoring your own pain? Bella's tears in that veterinary clinic mirrored the quiet moments you've wept. thinking no one noticed your struggles or sacrifices. But someone always notices. Someone always cares. As retirement approaches or grandchildren multiply, as joints stiffen and memories sometimes fade, remember that your worth isn't measured by youthful vigor, but by the depth of your compassion and the courage of your convictions. Like Bella, reuniting with her original handler while staying loyal to those who saved her. You too can embrace both your past and your future, finding purpose in connecting generations through the wisdom only time can provide. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.